How far would you go to get what you want? Will you be okay, or will you completely lose yourself in the process? This episode follows Bob as he struggles with that very question. The episode starts off with Bob showing the Belchers his new arcade machine that he bought for the restaurant called Burger Boss. The game resembles Super Mario Bros. And the main objective is defeat condiments and ingredients. That leads Bob to say that with the new addition of this arcade machine, he hopes to bring in some more business to purchase a new ventilation system for the restaurant. But this just led the family to suggest other things to purchase like sailing lessons, gift cards, and even an island, and another smaller island specifically for farting. So Bob decides to show the kids what he's made of, and ends up getting a score of 80,000 on Burger Boss. And Bob was really proud of himself for this, but then Jimmy Pesto across the street notices Bob's new arcade machine, so he decides to go check it out, and Bob tells Jimmy to try to beat his high score of 80,000. Jimmy Pesto then really weirdly, and in some other words, basically sexually harasses the arcade machine in front of Bob and his family. But then we see that Jimmy gets a score of over 300,000, beating Bob's high score by 220,000. And Louise makes sure her dad knows his high score by annoying him. But before Jimmy could leave, telling Bob a snarky joke, Jimmy Pesto writes his name on the game as Bob Sucks, which causes Bob to get pissed off and start saying things that doesn't even make sense. And it's about to get a lot worse for Bob. Anyways, Linda tries to help Bob get over this whole Bob Sucks thing by trying to unplug the game to see if that would help erase the leaderboard. But unfortunately, that didn't work. So Bob decided to take matters into his own hands and try to beat the high score. He tells Linda he'll be upstairs in just a minute, but he actually never goes upstairs. And even worse, he never even moves from his spot. Bob stays up all night playing Burger Boss to try and beat Jimmy's high score. Now this is where our first problem comes to play, and that's Bob's addiction and obsession over this arcade game. You see, obsession or addiction, especially with video games, can be harmful both mentally and physically. When gaming becomes more than just a hobby and something fun for you and the family, it turns into escape, and it can fuel unhealthy patterns, particularly for those dealing with high stress and anger issues. Excessive gaming can create a cycle where frustration and failure in a game can lead to more stress, causing emotional outbursts or even rage. But it can also cause some physical damage to you, because in this next scene, Bob tries placing a quarter into the machine and it seems as though he can't move his fingers anymore. Why? Well, Teddy says that it might be carpal tunnel, but Bob says that he's just dehydrated, and unfortunately, Bob can't even grab a glass of water. So not only is Bob's mental state at risk here, but also his physical state. Now, if he doesn't fix this issue soon, he may never flip burgers ever again. So he tells Linda that he's going to see a doctor or else he won't be able to play the game anymore. Unfortunately, he's going to see the doctor for all the wrong reasons. This whole scene is just a start. Later on, Bob gets into more and more of a mess. But continuing, Bob ends up going to the doctor and they give him some splints for his hands, but they also gave Bob some pain pills, which he quickly takes a good dose of. Linda is very worried about her husband's mental and physical health, so she's trying to make him stop playing the arcade game before he gets hurt, but Bob doesn't want to hear it. And the sad part is, even his own children want him to stop. Linda tells Bob, what's going to happen when you can't use your hands? Which Luis then says, yeah, how are we going to do our hitchhiking across America? Tina then goes, who's going to play harp at my wedding? And then Gene says, and how will we be a famous father-son close-up magic team? All of these responses, although in the show a little funny, but reality is they all want their dad to be okay. They don't want to see him this way. They want to see him still be able to use his hands. And research shows that addiction and obsession can lead to families breaking apart or even separation, which is something we all don't want for Bob, but he does end up going downstairs and playing Burger Boss all night anyways. Waking up from his bed, he seems to have overslept as he wakes up and takes a pain pill. But not just one, but 2 pain pills. Again, another slight foreshadowing and build up to where things get really tragic. He meets Linda downstairs at the restaurant, but to his demise, the Burger Boss arcade machine isn't inside the restaurant no more. And Bob starts freaking out. Linda tries to calm Bob down and tell him that she got rid of the game, but that only makes Bob freak out even more. Linda's still trying to calm Bob down, but Bob just goes off on this big rant talking about he needs to play this game to remove Bob Sucks from the leaderboard, and he's just straight up yelling at Linda that he's furious. Now, when you take something away from someone who is addicted to it, they might get really upset or angry. This happens because their brain is used to having it, and without it, they feel stressed or frustrated. If they use video games to calm down or escape from their problems, losing them can make them feel even worse. They might yell, get mad, or act out because they don't know how to handle their own feelings without it. But the problem is that Bob isn't using the game for an escape. He's just using it as a form of revenge and an egotistical battle. Throughout the show, we know Bob just wants to be better than Jimmy Pesto at just about everything. So being under Jimmy Pesto on the leaderboard really hurts Bob's ego and sparked this whole obsession over a dumb but clever arcade machine. But continuing on with the episode, we see Bob just tweaking out. It looks like he's going through withdrawals at this point, but you could also see the level of craziness Bob is at. It's just way over the top, and he's completely shut down from what's really important, and that's his restaurant, and his family, I guess. But suddenly Bob freaks out on Linda, asking her where they took the game. She says that it's probably miles away by now, but then he sees the arcade machine outside in the back of a truck, but it pulls away before he could get to it. And at this time, Jimmy Pesto is outside of his restaurant and is just teasing Bob. And Bob swears that he will beat Jimmy Pesto's score. So Bob ends up finding out that they took the game to a local arcade, but he needs kids to enter the arcade. So he goes back home and lies to his wife Linda about taking the kids out for sailing lessons, when in reality, he's taking them down to the arcade so he could play Burger Boss. So not only is he now lying to his wife, but he's also involving his kids in his addiction, which can go very bad, but we'll see later. Bob is now grinding Burger Boss until he meets this kid named Daryl, which Bob finds out that he has all the top scores in the whole arcade. Bob then asks Daryl if he's willing to help Bob beat the top high score so he can remove Bob Sucks from the leaderboard. Daryl agrees, but on one condition. Bob has to beat up Tyler, Daryl's bully. Bob is hesitant because, well, Tyler is a minor, but he just says we'll see. In the first order of business, Daryl decides to teach Bob a stance, which is just pressing your wiener up against the machine, I guess. Maybe Jimmy Pesto had a Daryl. Bob and the kids return home, and Linda asks how their sailing lessons went, which they all lied about. The scene cuts back to Bob back at the arcade with Daryl, and at this moment, Bob is taking some more pain pills, which he's now calling his awesome pills. But after taking the pills, Bob seems a bit weird. He sees his hands glowing, and he's imagining the Burger Boss character talking to him. Daryl asks Bob if he's high, and Bob just says that maybe he is, and then Daryl proceeds to say that if Bob is too zoinked to beat up Tyler, which in response, Bob asks, who's Tyler? Which led to Daryl asking him to focus up, so then Bob decides that it will be a good idea to take another pill. This, ladies and gentlemen, is drug abuse. Bob is so reliant on these pills, he's getting addicted to them. They help him get rid of the pain, but he's now just taking them just to take them. Taking too many painkillers can be really bad for your body. Your body might start needing them all the time, which can make it hard to stop. Too much can also hurt important parts of your body, like your liver or kidneys, and in some cases, it can be very dangerous. It's always best to take them when needed and the way the doctor or the bottle says. In Bob's case, he's really just taking them whenever he feels like it. Anyways, we go through a whole training montage of Daryl training Bob to become good at Burger Boss. And when that ends, it's finally time for him to beat the high score. But again, Bob has become reliant and addicted to his painkillers, so he then goes ahead and takes a good handful right before Daryl's bully Tyler arrives. Daryl gives Bob a bandana so he could look tough, and then Tyler and his group of bully friends approach them with some snarky remarks. Bob tries to calm them down by trying to be the adult in the situation, but in reality, he's really drugged up and out of his mind. So drugged up that he falls asleep. And at this point is when Tyler starts to punch Daryl. And then Bob wakes up suddenly and is now imagining Tyler as the chicken wing from Burger Boss. So now Bob looks like a crazy meth head who is just chasing a group of little boys down the streets of Seymour's Bay. This is definitely a new low for Bob. Bob then gets led into the Commodore's party where he gets tackled to the ground. They call Linda to get over to the location immediately, and at first she thinks she's in for a special occasion, but in reality, when she shows up, she's shocked to find Bob in a different room attacking 2 security guards, like he's some crack addict. Linda quickly puts a stop to all this, and Jimmy Pesto arrives and makes fun of them. But then Linda snaps back at Jimmy, revealing some pretty embarrassing stuff, something about pissing fights between him and Bob. And he is immediately not able to join this yacht club that he was looking forward to. But now there's a lot to take in here. First off, don't do drugs. I don't know how clear the world has to make it, but please do not consume drugs of any kind. They're all bad for you as you lose your senses, and if you're prescribed some, make sure you take the right amount of dosage the doctor suggests. Our ending scene leaves off with Bob apologizing to Linda about lying to her, and about using drugs, and using the kids for his own gain. Jeez, Bob really went crazy in this episode. Daryl arrives at the restaurant to tell Bob that he's inspired Daryl to not let Tyler bully him anymore, and he doesn't want to be a 60-year-old man who's still dealing with a bully, which hurt Bob's feelings when he said that, but he was still happy for him. And so Bob said that he was okay with Bob Sucks still being on the leaderboard and that he was over it. But when Linda leaves, he slides Daryl a 20 and tells him to knock Bob Sucks off the leaderboard, never truly getting over it. The lesson of this episode is about the dangers of obsession, addiction, and letting your ego take control. Bob's fixation on beating Jimmy Pesto's high score turns from a simple challenge into a full-blown addiction, affecting his mental and physical health. His need for revenge blinds him from what truly matters: his family, his business, and his well-being. The episode also highlights how addiction can spiral out of control, whether it's video games or painkillers. Bob starts using pills just to keep playing, ignoring the harm he's doing to himself. His obsession causes him to lie, involve his kids, and even humiliate himself in public. In the end, Bob realizes that some things aren't worth losing yourself over. But his final action, secretly paying Daryl to remove Bob's sucks, shows that letting go of an obsession isn't always easy. The real lesson: don't let pride and addiction control your life, or you might lose sight of what's truly important. And what's truly important is that you watch this video right here on your screen.